Welcome back to Flagstone Trail. You know our deep dive into Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power?
Yeah.
We're tackling a really interesting one today, Law 27. It's a play on people's need to believe, to create a cult-like following. And, we always try to figure out how to apply this stuff to the workplace in real life.
Right.
So no starting a cult in the office. But how can we actually use this?
Well, it's not really about starting an actual cult. It's more about understanding how belief works.
Okay.
How people are drawn to certain ideas and leaders.
Yeah, like those charismatic types everyone just seems to follow.
Exactly. They tap into something very basic about human nature.
Which is
we crave belief. We want to feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Especially in times of uncertainty, people want something to hold on to.
Exactly. And that's where this law comes in.
Okay, so how does it actually work? How do you create that kind of following?
Well, Greene lays out 5 steps in the book.
5 steps.
Okay.
I'm all ears.
And what's interesting is they can be applied in all sorts of situations, not just cults.
So like in the workplace.
Exactly. Like think about how you build a team or get people to buy into your ideas.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection here. So what's the first step?
First step, keep it vague, keep it simple.
Vague and simple. That sounds kind of counterintuitive. If you want people to follow you learn, shouldn't you be specific about what you're offering?
Not necessarily. See, vagueness creates a sense of mystery.
Oh, I see.
It lets people fill in the blanks with their own hopes and desires.
So it's like you're giving them a framework, but letting them create their own picture.
Exactly. Greene uses the example of this guy, Francesco Giuseppe Borri.
Borri? Who was he?
He was an alchemist back in the 17th century. Claimed he was chosen by the Archangel Michael.
The Archangel Michael. Okay, that's pretty out there.
Right. But people ate it up. He said he was going to revitalize the world, find the Philosopher's Stone, all of that.
And people believed him, just based on these vague promises.
Well, he was very charismatic, and he tapped into those deep-seated human desires, for meaning, purpose, and, of course, wealth.
So it's like he created a story that people wanted to be a part of.
Exactly. And that brings us to the second step.
Okay, hit me with it.
Emphasize the visual and the sensual over the intellectual.
Okay, that sounds intriguing. What does that mean exactly?
It means creating an experience.
An experience?
Something that appeals to the senses more than the mind.
So like a good marketing campaign? Lots of flashy visuals and catchy slogans.
Kind of, but think bigger than that. Think about how you present yourself, how you create an atmosphere.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture.
Yeah.
So it's about creating a certain vibe that draws people in.
Exactly. Greene talks about this guy called the Mountain Doctor.
The Mountain Doctor? Sounds like a character from a fairy tale.
Well, he was kind of a fairy tale. He was this 18th century healer who offered all these natural cures.
What kind of cures?
He had these sweet-tasting elixirs with names like the Oil of Joy or Against the Monster.
Against the Monster. That's amazing.
Right, and he diagnosed people based on their urine samples.
Okay, that's a little less appealing.
But the point is he created this whole sensory experience that made people believe in his methods.
Even though there wasn't any real science behind it?
Right, it was all about the spectacle, the feeling, the belief.
Wow. So we've got vagueness and spectacle. What's the third step?
Step 3. Borrow the forms of organized religion to structure the group.
Oh, now we're getting into the culty stuff.
Well, not necessarily. It's more about understanding how people are drawn to structure.
Structure.
Yeah, rituals, hierarchies, a sense of belonging.
Like in a religion.
Exactly. Religions have perfected this over centuries. They create a sense of community and purpose.
And how does that apply to building a following outside of religion?
Well, think about how you can create those same elements in other contexts.
Give me an example.
Let's go back to Borri the alchemist.
The Archangel Michael guy.
Yeah, he didn't start a religion, but he borrowed a lot of their ideas.
Like what?
He organized his followers into different levels of discipleship.
Like a hierarchy.
Exactly. And he demanded vows of poverty, asked for sacrifices, all that.
So it created a sense of being part of something exclusive.
Precisely. And it solidified his power, made people more dependent on him.
Wow, that's pretty intense. So it's not just about the message, it's about the whole structure you create around it.
Exactly. And that brings us to step 4. Disguise your source of income.
Wait, what? You're saying you shouldn't make money from your followers?
It's not that simple. But people are more likely to believe in someone who appears selfless.
So you have to pretend like you're not in it for the money.
Not pretend. But you have to be smart about how you present it.
Okay. How did Borri handle this?
Well, he lived pretty lavishly, but he always said his wealth came from the Philosopher's Stone.
Not from his followers.
Right. It reinforced the idea that his system worked.
So it's like the ultimate proof of concept. Look at me, I'm rich because of my teachings, not because I'm exploiting you.
Exactly. And this applies in other areas too, like those self-help gurus who sell you their methods for getting rich.
They're always super successful and living in mansions.
Right. It creates that illusion of authenticity.
So it's about framing things the right way, emphasizing the value you're providing, not the money you're making.
Exactly. And that brings us to the fifth and final step. Set up an us versus them dynamic.
Ooh, this one sounds a little dangerous. How do you do that ethically?
Well, it's about creating a sense of solidarity within the group.
Solidarity.
Yeah, like identifying a common enemy or obstacle.
So it's like us against the world.
Kind of. It taps into our tribal instincts.
Our need to belong to a group.
Exactly. And by defining ourselves against an other, it strengthens the bonds within the group.
I could see how that could be powerful, but also how it could be misused.
Absolutely. That's why this law is so fascinating. It can be used for good or for evil.
It's all about how you wield it.
Exactly.
Well, this has been super insightful. So far, we've got vagueness, spectacle structure, financial mystique, and a dash of us versus them.
Right. It's quite a recipe.
It is. But before we get too deep into the dark side of all of this, let's shift gears a bit and talk about someone whose name is practically synonymous with manipulating belief.
Oh, yeah. Who's that?
Franz Mesmer.
Ah, Mesmer, the OG influencer.
So Franz Mesmer, the guy who literally gave us the word mesmerize.
Yeah, his name kind of became a verb.
It's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
But what was his deal? How did he become so influential?
Well, he was this doctor back in the 18th century, convinced he'd discovered this invisible force he called animal magnetism.
Animal magnetism? Is that some kind of superpower?
Not quite. He believed it flowed through all living things and that he could control it.
To do what?
To heal people. He thought he could cure all sorts of ailments by manipulating this magnetic force.
Okay, so was he like a faith healer or something?
Kind of. But he presented it as science, even though the actual medical community wasn't buying it.
So how did he get people to believe him?
He was a master showman. He moved to Paris, the perfect place for a guy like him.
Paris? Why Paris?
Think about it. It was the center of the Enlightenment, a time of new ideas and a fascination with the mysterious.
Ah, so he was in the right place at the right time.
Exactly. And he knew how to play the crowd. He set up these elaborate demonstrations in his apartment.
Demonstrations? Like what?
He had this big tub filled with magnetized water and iron rods sticking out of it.
Magnetized water. Okay, that sounds a little hokey.
It was all part of the show. People would gather around, hold hands, touch the rods. It was very theatrical.
So it was more about the experience than the actual science.
Exactly. It created a sense of anticipation and excitement.
Did it work? Did people feel anything?
Well, that's the thing. People started having these intense reactions.
Like what?
They'd laugh, cry, scream, even faint. It was like mass hysteria.
Wow, so he really tapped into something there. But was it the magnetism or just the power of suggestion?
That's the million-dollar question. It's hard to say for sure, but Mesmer definitely understood how to create a spectacle.
He knew how to work a crowd, that's for sure. But if he was so successful, what happened? Why isn't mesmerism still a thing?
Well, eventually people started to get suspicious.
Suspicious of what?
Of his methods. They questioned whether there was any real science behind it.
So they called him out on his BS.
Pretty much. A scientific commission investigated his claims and concluded that it was all just hype.
So the bubble burst.
Yeah. His reputation was ruined. He basically had to go into hiding.
Wow, what a downfall. So even the most convincing illusions can't last forever.
That's the thing about belief. It's a powerful force.
Yeah.
But it can be fragile, too.
Especially when it's not based on anything real.
Exactly. And that's why Mesmer's story is such a cautionary tale.
A reminder that we need to be critical thinkers and not just blindly follow anyone who seems charismatic.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've seen how these principles can be used to manipulate people. But how can we use them for good?
That's the challenge, isn't it?
It is, because some of these tactics, like creating an us versus them dynamic, seem inherently unethical.
Right, but remember, we're not talking about starting a cult here.
Right.
We're talking about understanding the psychology of belief and using it in a more nuanced way.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we apply these principles ethically in the workplace?
Well, think about it. Every workplace has its own power dynamics and unspoken rules.
Right.
There are always those people who seem to naturally rise to the top.
You mean those people who just have that it factor?
Exactly. They're often the ones who are intuitively applying elements of Law 27.
Without even realizing it.
Maybe, but they're masters of creating a following, inspiring belief in their ideas.
Okay, so they're not necessarily manipulative. They're just really good at what they do.
Exactly. And if we can understand how they do it, we can learn to apply those same principles in a more conscious and ethical way.
I like that. So how do we do that? Where do we start?
It's like they've cracked the code of influence.
Right. So how do we do that? Where do we start?
Well, first we need to understand the 5 steps we talked about.
Vague and simple visuals and spectacle, that sort of thing.
Right, but it's not just about mimicking those tactics.
Okay, so it's deeper than that.
It's about understanding the why behind them, the psychology of belief.
Okay, I'm listening.
Take the first step. Keep it vague, keep it simple. In the workplace, this translates to having a clear vision, but not getting bogged down in the nitty-gritty details.
So like inspiring people with the big picture, but letting them figure out the how-to.
Exactly. Give people room to be creative, to own their part of the project.
That makes sense. What about emphasize the visual and the sensual?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't exactly set up a magnetized water bath in the conference room.
No. But you can think about how you present your ideas.
So like using visuals in a presentation or telling a compelling story to get your point across.
Exactly. It's about engaging people on an emotional level.
Making them feel something rather than just thinking about it.
Right. And then there's borrow the forms of organized religion.
Okay. I'm really curious about this one. How do you apply that in a workplace without being weird?
It's not about literal rituals, but think about creating a sense of community.
Community.
Yeah, a shared purpose. Team building activities, celebrating successes, even just acknowledging people's contributions can go a long way.
So it's about making people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves.
Exactly. And that fosters loyalty and a sense of belonging.
Okay, that makes sense. What about disguise your source of income? That one seems tricky.
It's not about hiding your salary, but it's about focusing on the value you bring to the team.
Not just what you get out of it.
Right. Be a team player. Celebrate everyone's successes.
So it's about being generous with credit and recognition.
Exactly. And finally, set up an us versus them dynamic.
Okay, I'm still a little wary of this one. It seems like it could easily backfire.
It can, but it doesn't have to be about creating conflict.
So how do you use it ethically?
Think about framing challenges in a way that unites the team.
Give me an example.
Instead of pitting departments against each other, focus on a common competitor or industry obstacle.
So it's about creating a healthy sense of competition.
Exactly. Something that motivates everyone to work together.
I like that. So it's about channeling that us versus them energy into something productive.
Right. And it can be incredibly powerful.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all this fits together. It's not about manipulation. It's about understanding how to inspire people.
Exactly. And that's what makes Law 27 so fascinating. It's about the psychology of leadership and influence.
It's about tapping into those deep-seated human desires for meaning and connection.
Right. And if you can do that authentically, you can achieve amazing things.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored the dark side of Law 27, but also its potential for good.
It's a powerful tool that can be used in many different ways.
The key is to use it wisely and ethically.
Absolutely.
And that's it for today's Flagstone Trail discussion. We appreciate your listenership. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into the 48 laws of power. Until then, keep those minds sharp and remember, knowledge is power, especially when you know how to use it.